Good evening, lady and gentlemen. Yet again, you seem to be in something of a minority, Councillor Chess. Very pleased to see all 7 members of the committee are actually present this evening. This is our first meeting of the new council year following the annual meeting. That means that the first item on the agenda is to elect a chair of the committee. Lisa, has anybody actually put in any formal nominations? No. Can I call for any nominations from the floor, Councillor Clerk?
Can I nominate David Chappell as chair of the committee, please?
Do I have in favour? Do I have any other nominations? I suppose that just for the record, all those in favour, please indicate. Thank you very much, everybody. I think it's a job I enjoy doing very much. Election of deputy chair of the committee, that has been Councillor Jones. Are you willing to stand again?
I am willing to stand again.
I'm happy to second.
Right. Both beat each other. Having asked him whether we do it. Are there any other nominations? All those in favour, please indicate. Such unanimity. This will continue throughout every item on the agenda.
We know a good team when we see one.
Right, the next one is to review the terms of reference for the committee. My apologies, I didn't actually spot that when Emma sent the agenda out last week in Lisa's absence on leave, whilst this item was on the agenda, nobody actually got a copy of the terms of reference for it, which might have vaguely helped. So Lisa's very kindly done us off a copy. So I'd really like to just take 2 minutes to have a quick look through those terms of reference. I can't say that there's anything that I can see. Has that still ended up?
That must be this must be an old version, because that was taken out last time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Sorry, that was taken out
And
last
the other
time.
one
It's
is-
an old version of.
We mentioned the Oracle. Is it just the Oracle now? We've got the
Advertiser.
But I suppose
it's not our communications, our full communications, so it should include social media and the stuff like that.
yes, so with some appropriate rewording to something like using all outlets available to the council, which does.
And you could put down part of the communications working party if you really want to be. You don't have to.
You have, it's on the other side, Val. The terms of reference is one on your desk.
Is there? Yeah, so we're looking at the last 2 items. The last one actually did come off last year, but at least last year, if not sooner, but seems to be on this topic. So ignore what it says about the label of the plan. Sadly, I had to give up on that one.
No, you need to mention that.
Councillor Fuller has just pointed out that what would then become the last bullet point simply refers to including Oracle on the website. Well, in fact, I don't think we've published an Oracle for some considerable time.
No.
But we are using
Social media.
we're using an advertiser, we're using social media of all types. So we just need some wording that covers that.
Basically, the comms working party. Just distribute it.
So it's all communication with residents through the communications working party and the website. How about that?
That's it.
And the first, if I may, Chair, the first bullet point, take out ENC and put NNC.
And then
Yes.
You
You can see that this was a transitional one when we still had NNC in the background. So,
Although when you go on the website, it does still refer you to click on it.
well, it does, yes. You
It's
still
not
go
saying
to
that,
Eastern
but they do need to catch
Plan.
up on there as well.
So if we take out references to the neighbourhood plan, wherever they might appear, and change, including Oracle, to what I said originally, with residents through the communications working party and website. With planning matters taking up rights including the neighbourhood plan. actually, there was rather more to that than meant to do. Other than that, everybody else happy with those?
The opening sentence, I think it should be no fewer than 7 councillors, no less.
Oh, let's be grammatically correct.
Anything else?
I think otherwise it's
Fine,
seems
so,
okay to me.
We've looked rest
our
of the
grammar is duly corrected, we've updated ourselves, everybody's happy, in which case I propose that we adopt those terms of reference and put them to the full council in the amended state we just decided upon.
Yeah.
Happy?
Yeah.
Apologies for absence, there aren't any. I'm going to skip past the representation of interested parties, not because there isn't one, but because we might as well have that as proximate to the planning application Mark Benz is now talking to us about as we can get it. And since that's the first thing on our list, it might be as well to do the declarations of interests first. So anybody got any disclosable pecuniary interests?
I work for Handel School, and that's the second issue on our
Three, that's the list, yeah.
And that's a ditto for me, Chair, for the Amble School, but also item 2315-104 again, land rear of the cemetery. My property backs onto the land in question. From Clifton Drive.
I mean, I would have said that the school link is clearly in other interests
Yeah.
rather than the disclosable pecuniary. I suppose it rather depends on whether you feel that anybody might think that because of your ownership of the property in Clifton Drive, there was actually a pecuniary interest. If you fear that that might be the case, it would probably be as well to actually declare it as such.
Yeah, I don't think there's any impact. I know I've spoken on the subject before, we had that conversation in relation to it doesn't really affect other than sort of a number, I've spoken before on behalf of the residents in these meetings.
And I doubt that it would actually affect the economic value of any properties in Clifton Drive. And Councillor Schumann?
Yes, I should declare that I know the owners of 4A Benningfield Road and also 75 West Street, which are up for discussion today. I don't think it's relevant, but I do also know David Wilson, at least I've met him a few times, but I think he's sold all his interests in David Wilson Homes.
So I have no idea whether he has or he hasn't, but
The name drop.
noted. Right. It's almost everybody's managed to declare one interest. Is there anybody else?
I'm innocent.
No.
Let's go.
Right, well, in that case, let's go back to the previous item. This is Mr. Mark Benz, who wants to talk to us about what is actually the first application on our list. Not the first time it's been on our list either. This is for Stoke Hill. So, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and everybody else, thank you. I brought Martin Dickens with me, who's actually the applicant as well. Felt that this has gone on a little bit too long, possibly for 2 or 3 applications, various different types. So we thought it might be good to come along and we can answer some queries and hopefully get over some of the sticking
Mr.
points.
Chiddick, I'm the son-in-law of the applicant. Because she's an 88-year-old lady. Right.
So if I may start just with a very potted history, planning approval was granted for the extension to the front of this bungalow with a patio with a terrace at the front. There is no garden at the rear of the property. This is a front garden property, and during the build, the enforcement officer was highlighted to a couple of issues, and primarily as a result of a relatively deep excavation at the front when the foundations went in. It sort of highlighted or exacerbated the fact that there was a lot more construction of wall there, and that's how you see it as it views today. The excavation has gone down to dig the foundations out, so you see a lot more wall that would actually disappear behind soil, earth. The enforcement officer agreed that a non-material amendment would be suitable to go in as an application. We put that application in. The case officer then decided that that wasn't suitable, so then we had to go in for a variation of condition application, section 73. And the last application was struggling, so we withdrew that, trying to, I believe we withdrew it, if I remember rightly. It's gone a little bit. We withdrew that to just take stock and come back and try and provide everybody with a little bit more accurate illustrations, which we hopefully have done, and I believe hopefully you have all of those now after this application. We believe one of the concerns, which is the overlooking at the front of the property onto a neighbour's garden, is primarily the issue that remains. Obscure glass was another issue, and that has all been installed, and we've installed that in more windows than actually were required by the enforcement officer. And that's really where we're at the moment. So I'm here to offer up some, if you need to ask any questions on the application, to try and reassure that there really shouldn't be any issues here. There's no massive walls being constructed. Everything is going to be reconstructed back into the ground. But we're just waiting for the necessary approvals to achieve that, really.
Can I ask you, because the application form refers us to a particular drawing, and then we go on the portal and that drawing doesn't appear to be there. And that's what, that happened previously.
Right.
But looking at it, and I'm just looking at my own note of it, applications to build pursuant to amended drawing 1351-02G, as opposed to the approved plan, which was 02A. But you go on the website and there doesn't appear to be an 02G drawing that I could see, and there's some.
O2H is there. Does that say H in the bottom right corner?
There is an 02H, but there isn't an 02G. Now, it may be that the reference on the application to O2G is wrong, or it may be that you provided them with the drawing, but NNC haven't put it up. But it does make it rather difficult when we're told the application is pursuant to a particular drawing and it doesn't appear to be there.
No, and this does keep happening with the way that they keep posting drawings. Yes. We were asked to do that additional drawing, which was one to show it in its sort of raw form. But essentially, the drawing that is there is the correct one. That is the correct version of it.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure, to be quite truthful, what hasn't been posted, but that is the correct version.
So if it's the correct drawing, it looks like the numbering on the application form is probably what's awry. But if that is the drawing we should be considering, then
that is the drawing. That is the reduced size patio. We've reduced the size of the patio in response to previous comments.
And councillors may well recall that we looked at this application when the first application for variation was made. And for various reasons at that stage we objected to it, but as Marcus said, the application was subsequently withdrawn and we now have a new application in front of us. I think our original concerns, which I'll try and summarise, have been that we didn't feel that the drawings, on the face of it, appeared to reflect what we understood the position to be, in terms of the degree of sort of height difference between the sort of the ground and the property and so on. But now we have the benefit of the drawer of the drawings in the very room. It gives everybody here an opportunity to ask any questions that they would like before we go on in a minute to consider that application.
Could I ask, were you supplying these photographic illustrations as well, as part of the application?
They're on the website.
If they're on the website, I
They're on
would
the
have seen
website.
it. Because I'm looking at everything.
A lot of things are being posted, but whether they actually get to the website or not.
Yeah, they are on.
They are on there.
They're on
Those
the
ones
portal.
are.
Yeah, we've,
Can I hand out a copy?
They're only really on the website.
they are on there. Good.
If anybody wants a copy,
Yeah, let's have a look. If you've got a copy, you might as well have a look at it. So you have to go on the website.
you've got an opportunity to perhaps see them.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
There's a payment
It's
previously.
there.
so-
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, I found it. Thank you. It's
It's not big
application, it's street name.
Maybe it's publication.
No, it's, yeah, this is it. And then it's not easy to find. It used to be search. They've changed it.
Or people
Yeah,
looking
view and comment.
stuff on the portal and also looking at these photographs. When I looked at it, there was simply one comment, and it's pretty obvious it's from the neighbour who has the issue with it. And one of the things that was being said was, why use timber sleepers? The worry being that in due course they would eventually rot away. Now, I have no idea, it might take quite a long time, but could you actually answer that? You must have some technical expertise on those sort of things.
We originally looked at brick to match the brick of the building, but the various comments that were initially coming from the planning officer were that they felt that was a bit harsh. It possibly would feel better if it was softened. And part of this was to make sure that we have an extensive landscaping scheme around the patio to diminish it somewhat. One of the failings of this application is at the first application point that no landscaping design was requested. So whilst the patio was shown in plan, which is what we were bound to show, obviously normally you would have conditions to demonstrate that, and then that would have been set out. So that there is an interpretation of that which is a little bit clouded. So when we went back for the non-material amendment and the variation, of course, the officers under enforcement can insist that we go into that, but of course we're working rather retrospectively then, because we are bound by the fact that the floor level is the floor level and the ground is where it is at the moment. So the idea was to go for sleepers to try and soften it. It would grey, and the planting would sit primarily in front of it. And but we did offer brick or stone or timber. We looked at every option. The applicants are very relaxed about whatever material it is.
So does anybody have any questions that
The four diagrams there show current state and then the progressive development of the patio, and shows that it obscures the harsh brick. It looks rather rude at the moment with a high level of brick. And the idea of patio was to obscure that, to make it look good from the road, which is why the pictures were provided.
Thank you. Yes,
I've got a question. It seems, if I'm reading the right things, one of the issues was an overlooking issue. Have I got that right? Is that being addressed in what's being said?
certainly with the concern of the neighbour, seemed to be an overlooking issue. I think on the comments that are now on the portal. So
But is that overlooking, sorry Chair, for you, is that an overlooking issue from a patio, or is that an overlooking issue from a window? Because the window's been addressed by having obscured glass on that side with the building.
Yes.
And so is it because that to me personally looks, that's a south facing, which faces Stone Door Road. And from my knowledge, if it is a neighbour, they're not going to see anything when we're sitting on that patio. That's just a view I have from my knowledge of the road.
I don't know firsthand. I haven't heard anything directly. I've only read, but I think it's looking from the patio onto one's garden, somebody else's
Right.
garden. I think that is the overlooking issue. But of course, that is no different to being in reverse, looking onto a back garden, onto a back garden. So I'm not,
And that's all of it.
and there is substantial planting down one side. There is quite a lot of planting, boundary planting. So I'm not really,
Because
from my point of view,
if we look at it from a planning perspective, we're not entitled to review. In my garden, I'm not entitled to review, but I'm entitled to privacy from amenity. So if an amenity is classed as somebody sitting outside enjoying the sunshine, well, I'm a bit confused as to why.
I can see into lots of neighbours' gardens from my bedroom window.
The other thing that's relevant is that there are substantial trees and
Yeah, I see that, yeah.
bushes and things
And you can screen.
on the border
Yeah.
already, and
Yeah.
you cannot see into the garden.
So can I get it right in my head as well? So to the left-hand side of the patio, there's a driveway.
yes,
And then if the gardening, so is it it's a shared driveway, so it's that feeds the other properties?
yes,
So to the left of so if I could take the hash bit, the bit to the left of that, I'm assuming there is a kind of screening between that driveway and that other houses.
there are
There's some
shrubs
shrubs
and
and
shrubs,
trees,
yeah.
It's the one with the massive front garden.
Yeah, I know which house it is, yeah.
I used to live at Leafless.
Oh, sure, house, okay.
Very nice.
Just trying to get it
Oh, sorry,
pictured
I
into
didn't realise that.
Okay.
Do I get to ask questions? I don't
Yeah.
know what point I can ask any questions, I'm not sure.
I can't see any reason why we can't.
No,
It's going to inform us, I'm quite happy to, as long as everybody else here is happy.
Okay. What height is the, when you come out of the patio doors, at what height is that above the ground level?
150 millimetres.
It's 1.6, so it's 1.6 metres in the air.
No.
If you have a look,
You said 150 millimetres.
no, it's
Patio
one,
above
the
that.
patio height at the side is 1.6 metres above ground level.
No, it's not.
It is.
No, if you look at where the original ground level was,
It's, I've got a picture of it, please, bring it up. I measured it last
it's a
night.
photograph of it.
I've got a picture of me standing there with a measuring staff. So I don't know. I think it's the other one, Lindsay, the other link. That was it. Come down. That one there, it's 1.6 metres. The patio comes out at 1.6 metres above ground level. That's me standing there last night with the measuring staff.
Above the ground.
It's 1.6 metres above ground level.
But the original patio level was already higher, has been excavated.
It wasn't that height, it wasn't excavated, that's the height from there to there. The height, the excavation that you're referring to is the front, not the side. The side has not been excavated. That, in your original plans, which have been granted, you showed this site as level.
Yeah.
The whole site was shown as a level site, and it's not a level site. This is why I raised a concern with the planning department, which is why they expressed concerns with yourself. And in November, you were asked to cease any further development on the front of the property while this was resolved. This issue was resolved, and nobody stopped anything. Carrying on, this tonight, I'm quite surprised. All you've turned it into is a sort of an argument about the patio. It's not the patio. It's a variation for the original planning, which was for a front and rear extension, and none of the plans that were put through, not one of them are accurate, and none of them show that slope, and the new ones show a slope, but they don't show the true slope. Now you put a topographical survey in. Now that's a plan view. All you've shown on those is the rafter heights. And I've got a friend who's the recently retired head of engineering for Brahimi, and he took the measurements, and he looked at that as well, and he said there's actually no finished floor level. So you've actually ignored this slope completely on the topographical. So again, you're trying to ignore this slope. Now I do live here. That on the plan, that distance from there to there is 1 metre on the plan, and that was what was granted by the council. A height of 1 metre from ground level. That is 2.3 metres above ground level, which is not what the plans were granted for. Here again, these two windows are new windows. They are not 1 metre from the ground.
They're obscured.
Doesn't matter that they're obscured. Your plans that you were granted were for a window 1 metre above the ground. And your plans were granted and they were to conform to the plans that you put in. And that is the whole condition that planning was granted, that the development conforms to the 3 plans that were put in. And it doesn't. I'm sorry, you can say it's a slope, you can say they're
I've
covered
never seen
in.
a plan that doesn't have a slope. Not a plan,
Okay.
that doesn't have a slope.
If we go to, Lisa, if you go to my,
Can I check and ask, well, I know normally I would time on when people can cost.
but there wasn't a slope.
What impact does that development have on your property?
I've got the height, it's
Yeah.
now overlooking my garden, seriously overlooking my garden.
Yeah.
The patio is at 1.6 metres. Again, I was told it wasn't.
Okay.
It is.
Yeah.
You know, so 1.6 metres, they're coming out of the building next door to me at 1.6 metres above the ground. So if you have a 6-foot fence panel, there's somebody walking out.
Yeah.
That's the original one.
Well, you're telling me it's not on a slope. You've just said to me that there is no plan that you put in that wasn't on a slope. That is it's your plan.
The windows.
It's your, I've not drawn it. This is your proposed west elevation. And it's not on a slope.
Yeah, I think we get the point that
It's
there is a
0.10.
dispute about the accuracy of the original plans, and we did consider that at the previous.
None of the plans that have been drawn are correct. If you look at the ones you've,
Subsequent plans, they are on a slope.
they're not the correct slope.
I was assured they were done to the topological measurements.
The topological, as I've just explained, do not use the finished floor level. I've had, as I've just explained, an engineer from Brahini came and measured it. I've measured it, and if you look here, this is it. Hold on, Lisa. If you just scroll down a little, you can just see. Is it this one? Oh no.
Hang on, I think it's in.
I think it's the new link I've just sent you.
I think the other important thing to recognise is that the windows
This
do
one.
not change in terms of the height, and the actual level within the building doesn't alter, so the viewing angle doesn't change in terms of the actual height of somebody.
That was your
in that
proposed
space.
one. The proposed one with a no slope. We go up now, Lisa, slightly. This is your new plan. And there's splitter again there. You've not got the slope right. You're way out. You're miles out. So these 3 windows are not 1 metre above the ground. They're at that height, viewing into my daughter's bedroom.
But the height of those and the height of the floor has not altered for the level
You-
of bungalow.
You were granted permission to have your windows 1 metre above ground level. You haven't shown a slope. It's quite simple. You haven't conformed to the planning.
Does it specifically say 1 metre above ground?
Chair,
Yeah,
if I may, so that's a planning enforcement issue.
which
That's
is
not for us to determine this here.
what this
So,
should be.
no, that's not a position,
At the
that's
moment,
not a
we're considering
position for us.
the application on the table, if you like.
But the application on the table is a variation from the
I
full,
appreciate it
which
is,
should be answering my questions, which were raised in October, November, about the slope. And this doesn't answer those. If this goes through, then this overrides the one that was granted. And they've not shown the slope. That slope is incorrect. So whether you say yes or no to this, is still inaccurate. That slope is not correct. You've not put your existing building plans were wrong.
I think.
And these are all wrong.
We've got the gist of it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm good at going on.
I think I'm going to cut that debate.
Yeah.
Very cleverly thought to myself. But we would then move swiftly from this to the next, turn over and of course look at my agenda, and the thing that's in the middle of it is actually approving the minutes of the last meeting. But it seems to me logical, whilst we've still got all of this in our mind, the debate in our mind to the persons present, we're going to do a slightly odd thing. We're going to look at the first of our planning applications, then we'll go back and do the minutes of the last meeting, and then we'll carry on with the rest of the plan. because it just makes sense to do it. So the first application, and I stress, in terms of what the application on the web portal says, is to change drawing A to drawing B, slightly more accurately, drawing A to drawing B. Unfortunately, what we've got is a drawing H. So there is something of an inconsistency between the application and the actual plan. It seems to me that the very definition of a variation is that you take the existing permission and you are varying something to do with that original permission. And if you grant the variation, what you've now got is permission for the thing as varied. But the issue, therefore, in a sense for us is, well, does the proposed variation deal adequately with the situation? I think we had previously come to the view that it might not be possible to build the property in accordance with the first set of plans because they really didn't seem to indicate the slope, so that it was necessary, if you like, for the issue to be readdressed. And there are clearly two conflicting views as to whether or not what now is shown on those plans does or doesn't do that. But in essence, it is as simple as that, as to whether or not those revised plans, assuming the property was built to them, stroke could be built to them, would that produce a satisfactory outcome? And there's clearly a considerable dispute between the applicant and representative on one side and the affected neighbour on the other. I think it is unfortunate that there is this sort of side issue about whether or not the application refers to the plan. But if we assume for the purposes of this that the plan that is shown is the one that the applicant actually wants permission for, the question is, do we consider that if the property was built in accordance with that plan, that it would be satisfactory? Because that seems to be what we're actually being asked to consider. The question is, do we feel that it has dealt with the issues that we had previously felt existed? Around the table, and whether somebody will kick us off.
I'm still, I was going to ask what would the owner of, sorry, is it number 4 or number 6?
10.
Number 10, sorry, apologies, okay.
Yes, so
What would be suited, what would be acceptable in terms of, as you as a neighbour, with that particular building? Now it's constructed, what would meet your needs in terms of your premises to meet the needs of everybody?
Well, it needs to conform to the original plan.
Yeah, I get that, I get that. That's something that the planning authority will do.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And if that's your only, if that's your main argument, then so be it. I was trying to work on the basis of, is there anything that the applicant could do that would assist in terms of screening or whatever to assist, to make sure that we get to that immediately, if you're saying.
Those windows are now start at 2.3 metres high above that wall, side wall. If I sit in my garden, it just towers over the garden.
Right, okay.
Can you just say something response to that?
Sorry, Chair, I know.
The structure of the building is in exactly the same place as on the original.
From where regardless of what the land goes down,
Yeah. There's been no variation in that.
Okay.
It's always been like that.
Sorry, there is a variation because the level of the ground is completely different from
Yeah.
what was.
No, I'm saying the structure of the building, I'm not saying the level of the ground.
The structure of the building follows, doesn't it?
But you can discount that because the reality is completely different from what you proposed.
Not quite, because I
Well,
think
yes, it is.
we referred to the original, the important thing is that the floor level within the building wasn't altered.
Yeah, but of course it isn't. But the point is that you completely failed to show the elevation of the site. Effectively, you were granted planning permission to build something that's impossible to build on that site. That's the fundamental problem as far as I can see it.
And that was, I think, the view that we came to when we last looked at
Absolutely.
an application.
Can I just, this is a theoretical thing, okay, so you might know this though, what is the legal standpoint here? In terms of if something is built and someone has an objection to it, what is the legal?
Well, I suppose, I think I'm anticipating what you were saying, and it really picks up on what Councillor Davis made earlier. If somebody purports to build something in accordance with a planning permission, but in fact doesn't build it in accordance with that permission, then clearly enforcement officers could turn around and say, you've not done it right, and require them to do it right, and that unfortunately meant sort of tearing some of it down and starting again. In theory, that could happen.
Okay.
And I think that the difficulty there seems to be is that those original plans, we're reasonably satisfied. You couldn't build in accordance with them because they do produce a distorted picture. Query, if you change the plans to correctly show the slope, how many other alterations do you have to make potentially to make it acceptable and remove the issues? And if I understand the neighbour's problem, part of the problem is that because of the degree of difference in heights, the windows that are now there present an overlooking issue. I suppose if those windows themselves were obscured, at least it would have removed that, but I don't know how feasible it would be, because I don't know how many. It would be an unusual house if a large number of the windows were actually obscured, I suppose.
They already are obscured.
They are obscured.
No, they're not. Two of them are.
If all the windows, I'm going to pose a question now myself. If all the windows on that side of the building capable of looking into your adjoining property were obscured, would that alleviate all or some of your concerns?
Some, but not all. It's the height, it's the whole height of the building. It's 1.5 metres high, and it should be. The whole thing is coming down onto the back garden. It's towering over us.
Right.
And and basically, as you just pointed out, the plans that were granted just haven't. This is the plan that was granted, and that's not what's been built. From a legal point of view, from the planning department, they haven't conformed to the planning that they were given. It's that simple. It's no more difficult than that. Those were the plans that were granted. That is not what's been built.
So we've got a two-stage issue, haven't we? Issue number one, I suppose, is look at the variation that is being proposed. If the property could be built in accordance with it and was built in accordance with it, would we feel that that was satisfactory? If not, on the basis of it, we should consider objecting to it. And potentially, there may be an issue for inviting the enforcement officer to take a look at the finished product, as it were, quite separate from the planning application, but just as part of our normal function about wanting people to comply with planning, and say, well, if it doesn't comply with planning, you have to take whatever action you see fit. However, ultimately, the judge of whether it does or doesn't lies with the planning authority. It certainly isn't mine,
If I may, the final thing to say is though that the vast majority of this property has been extended in accordance with the drawings. The ridge lines, if you work from the top down, you take it from the bottom up. If you take it from the top down, the ridge lines are all correct, the heads of the windows are all correct, they don't alter.
Of course they will from the top.
Well, but the point is that the planning officer would have gone out, seen the site, they knew what it was, and they were looking at it as a whole. So I take on board the comments, and of course we do, and that's why we're here trying to resolve this so can be amicable.
Can I ask, what did you think when you saw that drawing, you saw the heights of those
I saw that,
cables?
and this was
You didn't,
brought up during the height of COVID. I looked at it, I'm not normally, I don't have a problem with things. I looked at that and thought, you know what, that's coming now, I can put a 6-foot fence panel up, and I didn't worry about that. The height is not a problem because it's bungalow height. So I never actually said anything. The other neighbours that did say things were because originally you put a door in that went out onto a shared drive, 2.5 foot in the air due to the slope. So you stepped out with a 2.5 foot drop. So you had to change that and do that. That's the original plan if you want to bring it up, Lisa. But
That's the original,
that was an amended one.
that one.
so your problem isn't with the building as it was designed, because you looked at that and thought it wasn't a problem.
I didn't, no, because you haven't drawn the slope. You haven't drawn the slope. And the heights were all wrong. So that to me looked like a 6-foot fence panel behind that window. There's that one, not with the door on
You
it.
know the slope of your own drive.
I do know the slope of my own drive. It's a shame that the person who drew these pictures didn't know there was a slope
I
there.
think I'm going to have to stop. The constant in this danger will never actually get beyond this item of the agenda, and there's rather a lot to deal with. Does anybody else want to either ask any questions of the people present or express any particular view? Because I suspect the only way I'm going to be able to deal with this is literally to put it to a vote as to whether councillors around the table consider we should object to this or not.
I'd just like to go back to Councillor Davis's important question, and that was, is there anything that can be done? Because I'm not sure we've got an answer to it, that would allow both parties to proceed satisfactorily.
Is that aimed at me?
Well,
No, I don't know, sorry.
I think we've done quite a few things to adjust the plan according to comments we've heard.
I don't think you've done anything, or you haven't done
so we're
anything.
an impasse.
It's all,
We're an impasse.
this drawing this variation that's put in now is not dissimilar. In fact, it's virtually 100% the same as the one that you were given last time. And so, as far as I understand it, the outcome should be the same. You've been presented with 2 sets of plans that are the same. Why would the outcome be any different? Those new drawings are the same as the last drawings, and the same as the previous ones, the same as the 2 that have been withdrawn. The third one's the same.
Right. That's good.
I think we need to make a decision as to what we need to do. There is a suggestion that, what was that one?
I think we reserve our position on this planning application until such time that we put comments in previously. I think we should reserve our position subject to any action that planning enforcement choose to make,
I mean, on one level,
or abstain on the vote.
I think the difficulty with doing that is, because this is a de novo application, there would be no comment from this council on it if we didn't put one in. Now, at the end of the day, it may be our decision that we make no comment. It is open to us.
I say that purely on the information around heights, topography of the land, screening, and all those issues. When there is different things at stake here for 2 independent parties who are both at a different level, and we haven't got anybody here from East Northland Planning in terms of them giving a view around the decisions they have or haven't made, even from an enforcement perspective, or even, so I'm not in a position to make a a position on that because based on that.
So perhaps I was wrong in saying that the options lie between either giving approval or objecting, because the other option is that we don't comment on it at all. Councillor Fuller.
I have to not, again, I'm not in a position to make a decision. I do feel that we could possibly recommend to the parties concerned, I mean, let's be frank. It's going to be one of those things where you've got two sides of the argument, you're never going to meet in the middle. If we could meet in the middle, come up with a compromise where each party has to accept they're not going to win everything, but it's a compromise solution, then I can see it happening. But right now, we're in an impasse. And I don't think we're in a position to make a vote on it.
I think the difficulty with suggesting a compromise is that I rather suspect at least one of the parties thinks that the only way that's going to work is to tear down what's there and start
Yeah, but
again.
that's not what we want.
Which would be an enforceable issue if it wasn't this year.
I'd like to propose the board that we make no comment on this application at this current time based on information.
I'm aware that Councillor Chester wanted to say something,
Well,
so
we-
I will come back to that in a moment.
We've got a window that's in the right place and round that's in the wrong place, it seems to me. What about having a situation with no window, so that there was no overlooking? I mean, something drastic's got to happen. Or we have to ask for enforcement to have a view.
Councillor Davis has proposed that we make no comment on it and in effect simply leave it to NNC to make a decision without expressing a view. I've got the
I'll second that.
distinct impression.
Yeah.
I was about to say, I've got the distinct impression that Councillor Fuller would second it, but you
Yeah, we could
that.
do it.
So we have a proposal. I think it's this kind of proposal that isn't capable of being, as it were, amended. I mean, an amendment is a completely different proposal, whatever it is. So I'll take a vote on that proposal. If a majority is in favour of making no comment, then we will make no comment and we'll leave it to NC completely. So all those in favour of making no comment at all, please indicate. 2, 3, 4. Seems to me that
I put my hand up, I said I'm in favour of that, but I think we do need to make a proviso about that.
which sounds like some
Which is
sort of
going back
amendment
to when we discussed.
I said I didn't think it was capable of amendment. You told me how we could amend that then.
Well, saying that we can't comment because, as we have stated at a previous meeting, what the planning permission that was granted is not in keeping with the site.
Yes, I think the expression we used before was that it wouldn't be possible to build
Yes, precisely.
the structure in accordance with the original planning application. Because to some extent,
It's
you
just
could
not
argue
just
that
saying
the
it.
applicant has recognised that, hence the fact they're trying to put in an application to variance to try and correct the situation.
The horse is bolted, if you see what I mean. It's there.
I suppose
That's why it's planning enforcement.
it's only bolted unless
It's not an issue.
unless there's a planning
Planning
enforcement
enforcement
issue, which is
Not an issue.
not for us. So I can clarify, Councillor Shura, on the issue of either no comment or something else, and assuming for the moment we don't say anything about a particular qualification to it, because that will introduce yet another issue. Would you say no comment, or do you feel that because of the qualification you want to make, you can't say that, because otherwise we'll have to see if
It's
you
just
can propose an amendment that works?
All I'm saying is that I don't think we can comment because I'm just drawing attention to the comment we made at the last time. Nothing has actually changed.
So what you're saying is, you make no comment because of X.
Yes, exactly.
That's my viewpoint and why I haven't voted to.
Yeah.
Right, I think we seem to be coming towards a consensus. Quite sure what it gets us, but the answer is, on the face of it, we have a decision, which is in essence not to make a decision, but but to highlight the concern that underlies the fact we haven't made that decision. I'll endeavour to think of some wording for that, and email it to you later. But I think that
Do you want us to vote on that final one?
seems, well, I think it's pretty clear, but anyway, to the extent that that was an amendment, is there a seconder for the amendment? I think there is, because I think Councillor Chester was
Yes,
associated
yes.
himself with it, right?
And then do you want to vote?
So, first of all, voting on the amendment, those who would favour that amendment to the original proposal, which could include people who voted for the original proposal. So we are now more or less
Members, one.
unanimously agreed, somewhat tortuously, but I think
We got
we have reached a view.
Sorry.
You probably leave neither party in the room entirely happy, but it is what it is. But thank you both for coming, for attempting to assist us in our deliberations. But I think we can move on. As I indicated earlier, I postponed dealing with the minutes of the last meeting to enable us to actually move swiftly onto that specific application. So going backwards, Martin.
Thanks very much for your time, sorry to drag it out.
No, it's fine.
Okay, thanks very much.
Make sure that everybody gets the opportunity to have those. So these are the minutes of the meeting of the 2nd of May. Present with myself, Councillor Chester, Councillor Davis, Councillor Flora. Does anybody want to propose that those minutes are accepted? Councillor Chester, anybody wish to second that? Councillor Davis, those in favour? Bear with me.
There needs to be some compromise. Someone should have tried that. One of them, two words were to do.
Right. Let's hope that we can get through some of the other applications without spending quite as long. I think there are at least some on here that aren't going to trouble us for very long.
Oh, sorry, we're still in that.
I was just saying, I think there were applications on here which may not trouble us quite as long
Oh, okay.
as the one we've just done.
Agreed.
Probably as well.
Any others?
Here at midnight.
There's one.
The next one is Laxton Grammar. It is, of course, an application for a listed building consent, and it involves both internal and external alterations to allow for some remodelling, to include provisions of ventilation and drainage, to new and remodeled toilets, changing rooms, and to existing areas with condensation damage. There are a lot of papers on the portal. I apologise for the fact that my note effectively runs for the best part of 2 pages, most of which consists of simply listing, because it was the simplest way to do this, what it is that they are proposing to do. And actually, when you start looking at it, I suspect a lot of it is pretty uncontroversial. Changing around partitions, converting areas from one thing to another, and so on. So I hesitate to, as it were, push the committee in any particular decision here. Proposed external works seem to be extremely limited in nature, because they seem to be partially some issues around the windows, the replacement of a skylight, and some installation of extract build. And it's perhaps interesting that Historic England had no advice to give, and NNC Archaeology didn't feel that the proposed works would result in any harm. That's a problem.
In the past, I used to be a teacher and I have experienced, and I've been involved in projects where they've done similar things. It's for a radio station, but it requires quite a lot of building in Old Dryden. And they'll do a good job. That's it. I mean, I've seen toilet, all the things there, I've seen it. I know they're doing a good job, and I'm fully in favour of this. I don't have a problem with this at all.
Chair, if I may, Chair, just to put it in some context, Blackstone's been, because of the growth of Blackstone House, and I think Councillor Jones will confirm, it's been split into two, so that, in terms of the numbers and whatever. So it's
Sadler, if I remember.
Yeah, so it's to assist that actual process, knowing that the school haven't got any more premises, more buildings, and they're trying to make best use of the buildings they've got, keeping it within the existing Laxton, which they're looking to do. So
Is it going to be two houses? Is it another house?
it's going to be, it's going to be two, sort of like a Laxton, but there'll be another one attached to it.
Interesting.
But 2 day.
And this may very well be the sort of application where we probably safely say that, provided that no historic fabric is damaged or removed, unless absolutely essential to the proposed works or something along those lines, and subject therefore to the view of the conservation officer, we don't have any objection to it.
Which they appear to have done, to have consulted.
They've obviously taken quite a bit of trouble in getting to where they've got to,
No
with the
doubt.
material that's on that side. And I think, I tend to echo it, and I've never been employed by them at school, but I'm not unfamiliar with some of their buildings, having put 2 children through it. They do seem to take pretty good care of their housing stock. I think that's the right word, not housing stock. Building stock, is the best way of putting it. But if anybody's got any issues about anything specific or a wider point, otherwise I suspect we can leave it at that. The next one is about as simple as it gets. It's an application in Lime Avenue for a single-storey cottage. As I put it, there is literally one drawing on the portal, there isn't even, for some bizarre reason, a copy of the application talking about Mark Ben's telling us about documents that don't get posted. For some reason, there is literally no application there, but there obviously has been one. What we've got is a drawing. It shows a proposed single-storey porch, pitch roof tiles on it to match the existing, a Velux roof window. The drawing makes it look as if there's probably cladding. It has a UPVC door, 2 windows on the front, 1 on either side, and the porch extension includes a WC, so not surprisingly, one of the windows on the side is obscured. I can't see any obvious reason for getting in the least excited about this application. I would have thought it was a fairly stonewall, no objection. So I missed something.
No, it's nowhere near conservation, it's nowhere near, so. At least they put planning permission in.
Well, they've applied for it and
Some people don't.
so. Right.
Here we go.
I've lost track of the number of times the next application has been before us. I think this is the 4th iteration. For the erection of 50 dwellings with associated open space, parking, landscaping and access. This is land to the rear of the cemetery at Stoke Road. There are no fewer than 77 new documents on there, or at least there was when I did it. I don't know if there are any new ones over and above that, I doubt it. They've produced amended planning document, planning statement, design and access statement, transport assessments, flood risks and ecological assessments, and just about everything else besides. Having looked at some of that material, the developer I think it's probably the design and access statement, essentially says that the changes they've made is to put a shared surface on the northern part of the site, from plot 25 to plot 37, due to reconfiguring the road, due to certain concerns flooding. Regarding the modelling of the drainage ditch leading to plots 35 and 37 being slightly repositioning of the pond and pump, pump station, ditch station. Again, as a result of discussions with the LFA, and they've actually added one more affordable plot, 11, i.e. 22% of the development, as opposed to the 40% referred to in the jointly called strategy. And I've set out that the planning statement then goes on to refer to various things it's already done in previous iterations of the plan to try to meet various concerns that have been raised with them. There are masses of comments on the portal. There were 80 when I last looked at the weekend, 58 of which were from the public, 22 from consultees. And I've sort of highlighted 4 that I thought were perhaps of particular interest. NNC Housing Strategy seem to have accepted that the developer has satisfied it that a departure from 40% affordable housing is justified on viability grounds, or they wasn't utterly happy with the configuration of some of the properties. And I set out the different configurations that are preferred, which is sometimes the same number of bedrooms, but somehow designed to accommodate slightly more people in certain cases. Anglia Water Surface Water Drainage Assessment Team, which is a bit of a mouthful, seek a raft of conditions, but have also rather confusingly concluded by stating we can't support the application until adequate surface water drainage information has been submitted. Which kind of suggests that despite having suggested a raft of conditions, they're not absolutely satisfied and should get permission at all yet. They seem to be worried as well about attenuation basins, both on this site and the adjoining site, because it's a certain element of Never the Twain should meet. David Wilson Homes don't either own or have an option on the entire site. It's in 2 different ownerships. We've previously looked at a planning application for outline permission on what we call the small site, which has got outline permission for 9 dwellings, but had its own attenuation fund, etc. And Anglia Water, perhaps not too surprisingly, seem to think that rather than having 2, particularly if they're in relatively close proximity, it would be rather better if there had simply been 1 that served both developments. Seems to be entirely logical, but whether it's entirely practical from the perspective of the different ownerships remains to be seen. NHS Northamptonshire Clinical Commissioning Group say, and I quote, there will not be sufficient capacity in the local primary healthcare system to absorb the anticipated increase in demand created by this development. Admittedly, that is what they are now saying in relation to practically everything of any size. However, they do seem to think that a financial contribution of a fairly modest £25,000 would get past their concerns. I have to say, I was a little surprised that was the gist of what they were saying. Actually went back and checked that it wasn't 254,000.
I was going to say the decimal points.
Actually, it is £25,000 on what they've posted. Interestingly enough, Pilton, Stoke Doyle and Wanhope don't think that the amount of cemetery provision is adequate. Indeed, they describe it as being woefully inadequate. They also previously objected on grounds of access, increased traffic flow and safety, limited nature of cemetery provision, design and appearance, flood risk and infrastructure, mirroring many of the concerns we have expressed over the last couple of years, frankly, that we've been looking at this application. I asked Lisa to ensure that we had a copy of our comments from the last time that we looked at this, which wasn't actually all that long ago. And this was variation of committees, actually looking at it, it's not quite what I was thinking of, because there's an earlier one where we objected to the substantive application. And it was my view that the reasons we were objecting to that substantive application are not frankly addressed by what the latest raft of proposed documents actually do. I just don't think it actually meets the concerns that we've expressed previously. And although it's becoming a bit like a stuck vinyl record, I'm not sure we have a great deal of option but to repeat our previous concerns almost verbatim and say that what is proposed does not meet our concerns, even if some of them are not shared by highways or in quite the same way with the clinical commission group and so on. Councillor Boyd.
Obviously, this is the one that has pushed us beyond our limits of acceptability, having had to accept and endure the issues of all the other ones we've had in town. I don't think I've seen one with so many objections before. I don't remember the same objections for Cotterstock Road, or actually probably the one
Not too dissimilar, I
the one that
suspect.
stopped down at Watson's had a lot more objections. We haven't had the actual major people coming marching in and demanding, pitchforks and stuff like that, which we've had with the other one. But this is definitely a step too far, as I'm concerned. I think the only thing we can do is, this is like a blocking strategy. But are we in that position where, like everything else, it's all being done? There's a deal. I'm not going to say it, but things are happening. Whatever we say will do, it will still happen. So the only thing that works when that happens is we have to then, like we're doing with what we're trying to do, is to negotiate the best possible outcome from this to make sure it fits into the town for the best of its ability. That's a decision that we need to make. And then so our objections are focused on ensuring that if it does happen, at least the issues that really affect us are sorted. So we get the best possible outcome. They're not just going to plonk 50 houses on a bit of land where it floods because the water flows over the land. It's going to be a nightmare.
The difficulty, it seems to me, with saying secure the best possible outcome, the best possible outcome, is probably something very different to what is on the table. And would include a significantly better provision in terms of the cemetery land.
Yes.
When we first started looking at an extension to the cemetery, back in the days when we were trying to have our own neighbourhood plan, councillors who were on the council then may recall that the proposed extension was at what they call the back of the cemetery. So rather than this one, which is now pushed to the side, it was along the back and was along the whole of the back, including both tracts of land, the Bearton land there and this land. And had all of that come into it, it would have secured the future of the cemetery for considerably longer than this extension to the cemetery would do. And this cemetery extension, it's not altered by this as far as I can see, is along the sort of right-hand side of the new entrance road into the development, and so runs to the depth of the site rather than the width of it, and will generate some extra capacity, but in terms of extra capacity that's going to take us, say, not only to the end of the current 2031 plan period, but say beyond that to the proposed 2041 plan period. I think we're likely to run out of spaces before 2041.
Yes.
Which means we're going to lose another cemetery somewhere. And although I appreciate that it seems like we are probably banging our heads against a brick wall, particularly the clinical commission group, very tempted to use the words fobbed off with £25,000, and I think I had so nearly uttered it that I'm going to say it. But does it really alter our view that the infrastructure issues are more fundamental than that? And similarly, despite what NAEC housing strategies say, we are persuaded that it wouldn't be viable to have more housing. Do we just take that? Or do we say, no, the Joint Core strategy said it should be 40%. There is a crying need in this town for affordable housing. And to simply acquiesce in a setup that delivers roughly 50% of what is envisaged, certainly speaking personally, goes against the grain for me, and it did for us last time, and I don't see the provision of a single extra affordable plot, frankly meets our previous concerns. Councillor Davis, and then Councillor.
Just picking up on the affordable side, which is the housing part. I may have said it at the previous meeting, so I apologise if I repeat, but some of the councillors probably weren't in the room at the time. They are the furthest away from on that site for people that are likely to want to use public transport. So not only is it a smaller part of the land, that's furthest away, and they put a bungalow in, which you would argue, well, I'll say you argue you're going to give somebody less able, and we talk about the amount of transport in town, then they're likely to get in a car, but if they don't own a car and they want to get somewhere, a mobility scooter, whatever, the topography of the land means they're going to have to go up over a hill to down the other side to join Stoke Door Road, and then the footpath from Stoke Door Road to town is inadequate to then go over that bridge, and they're not sufficiently catered for all those particular issues. I'm talking families, those with pushchairs, those with wheelchairs or mobility scooters. That's the affordability side, and they're the furthest away. The nearest bus stop would be on West Street. I think you'll find, because they talk about the access going down off the side, Stoke Door Road, turning right and taking the footpath, because you won't have access from the side into the other footpath, because that's their private land to get to the public footpath. That footpath is only good if you've got a decent pair of Wellingtons on or a pair of boots at certain times of the year, or when there's crop there, and then that takes you up the path that brings you to the top between Lytham Park and Wakely. But again, that's not a made-up footpath for anybody's use. So that's the sort of the housing side, the affordable housing bit. It's not appropriate on that particular point.
And that footpath is almost impossible when it's very
certain times of the year when it's not.
and also when the crops are up.
Councillor Chester.
I've almost forgotten. Can you remember how much land we were going to get? Because I think it's shrunk for the cemetery.
25%.
As time's
They were
gone.
going to give us 25%, weren't they?
It's now 7%.
But
Yeah,
also
and it's what sort of land it is.
because the Stoke Doyle argument was there was too many properties on the bank on that particular side, and it would then the East Northants didn't like that, so hence they literally moved those premises up over the top of the hill.
Yeah.
Which then I think there's about 5 to 10 of them which are on the side, which is where they're now proposing the cemetery part, which the cemetery then bid will be on a bank. And then those that are on the side, which I think is about 8 properties, they're then going to be on one of the highest parts of the site,
Can't be looking over.
over the top. And I think the topography of the land, they'll all extend higher than the houses, although they've tried to be creative in their drawings and their photographs, what they're taking photographs of.
Yeah.
The topography of the land, all those houses that sit on the top there, will be higher than the properties that are in Benfield Road. In fact, they're actually probably on the same height as the roof line of the houses on Benfield Road. So if you're standing at the top of Benfield Road, top of Clifton Drive, you will see houses above you. You won't see the trees of the cemetery. You'll see house roofs across the top, all the way across.
So just to finish off what I was saying, having had.
Sorry, Ralph.
No, because it fits,
25%.
it fits with what I'm trying to say. Going back to the layout of the land at the back of the cemetery, etc., that is what the Feffries originally wanted us to have.
Yeah.
And we seem to have somehow or other completely forgotten the history of this. Isn't it? It was, it was the Feffries that wanted it.
You're quite
These
right.
developers have just ridden roughshod over the whole history.
And clearly, the developers saw that they needed to make provision for a cemetery extension in order to get the site. But of course, they want that to have the minimum impact on the profitability of their development. And that has resulted in what certainly Wadden Ho regard as woefully inadequate, and I'm pretty much inclined to share their view about that. But we have made the point before, and I'm restating it. But my sort of question to the committee is simply this: is what has been proposed sufficient to meet our previous objections? And I can't actually see how it possibly can be, because almost every single one of the things we were worried about before, we will remain worried about,
Absolutely.
including the points that Councillor Davis has made previously and the points that have just been made. Councillor Fuller.
Then I think the only way they're going to get planning permission from us, and we need to draw up this list, is a list of things that we need, like they have to cross. So, sorting out the bridge, one. Well, we can't do much about the cemetery space, but the footpath, improving that. We need to have our sort of backstops where we say, we'll let them know, if you want to do planning permission, this is what you need to do. And we could have said, do. That's what we've done a bit with, I can't remember the word. The other one that's not been built yet, so we put on hold.
Some questions.
So we did that with them. We said, this is what we need to do. You've got to sort out this, you've got to sort out that, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to do that. Because, as I said, I don't think we can stop it, but we can mitigate it. And that means we need to come up with our stopgaps that we say, we've got to do that, we've got to do that. Because they're builders, they can do anything, as you know. Look at what they did at Cottstock when they did that bit of road. Because we were saying it's dangerous, they sort of redid the road. That would have cost a bit of money. I mean, it cost how much money to put that little cycle thing in? And then that would have cost hundreds of thousands.
They're not upgrading the whole of Stoke Door Road there, aren't they, all the way to
No, but we could,
Unless Country Lane.
I know, but we could put some
And it's an 8 mile.
reasonably
and
feasible
when-
things.
And when Stoke Door Road floods, because it does.
Yeah,
we've
up
had
to
a bridge down before now.
Yeah, the flooding is the big thing.
Those residents have got an 8 mile detour going all the way through to Filton, turning left and going through Lilford to come all the way back into Filton. Because they won't get across the bridge.
But the bridge is the issue and the flooding is
The
the issue.
difficulty we know about that, I do feel somewhat let down by other parts of the equation. But highways do not see the same issues with this development as we do. Just in the same way as they didn't in relation to the Cottstock Road, St Peter's Road one, just in the same way as they didn't with St Christopher's Drive. And I like to think, we live here, some of us have lived here a lot of years now. I think our view is likely to be at least as valid as theirs, even if we don't have the technical expertise. Yes, we do now have the benefit of the transport study that we're continuing to
And we
work on.
can lean on our councillors to.
And we can do that. But
We're not happy
at
with
the end of the day, we have new drawings, new
No.
alterations, but unless they meet our previous objections, and I can tell you they don't, I can only advise that the committee simply says that these do not meet our previous objections, and therefore we still cannot support the development. And whilst I'm sympathetic to Councillor Fuller's idea of, yes, but if we could somehow grab some things off the shopping list, that would be better.
We might not.
On one level, the difficulty with that approach is that it just kind of looks like we can be bought off, that we will withdraw our objections to developments under certain circumstances, and that we don't kind of stick to our guns on these things. And I think that, frankly, I think the public out there would expect more of us than that. And if we're not happy with it, and we haven't been,
Just carry on.
you would need to do an awful lot more than is being done to make us happy. I fear Councillor Fuller's right. Sooner or later, they are going to get permission for this. Because gradually they're trying to knock off the objections that NLC come up with, that the Anglian Water come up with, and so on. They're entirely there yet, even now, but you know, they're moving in that direction. But there we are.
It's so nicely done though.
Does anybody else have any views? If not, I'm going to just simply ask whether councillors now feel that their objections are met, so that they would no longer object, or do they continue to object?
Well, is that a proposition?
Well, it's literally one of the other. I'm going to go around the room. Councillor Davies.
What object or object?
Object or
Objectors.
Object.
Objects.
Object.
Object.
object. We are unanimous. We are still not happy.
We're moving.
Right, as if having that application, our agenda isn't bad enough, we will move to the development called Cotterstock Meadows. Quite why Cotterstock Meadows, when it's partially in Foundry Parish and partly in Blackburn, I have no idea. Why was it Blackburn?
It was called, it was done by the school kids.
Anyway,
Yeah.
enough. This is interesting. There is policy, I think it is in the joint core strategy, that requires developments over a certain size to offer a certain number of self-built properties. And that becomes part of the planning conditions. However, there are sort of caveats, which in broad terms means that if the developer tries to sell self-built plots but can't, then he can come back and invite the local authority to say, right, well, if you can't have the self-built plots, you can have something else. In this case, the developer claims to have tried to obtain offers on full plots and maintains that contracts have not been exchanged on any of them at all, and therefore they put in a plan, effectively, therefore, to seek permission to do away with the 4 self-builds and put up 4 new houses on plots 18, 19, where it's 20 and 21. I don't know for a fact what the position is, but I have heard from more than one source, and there is an objector on the actual portal itself, who maintains that whilst it's possible that the developer has stuck to the letter of, as it were, what was required, it hardly seems to stick to the spirit of it, suggesting that the amount being asked for each plot was wildly unrealistic, over £300,000 per plot. Bearing in mind the sort of size of the plots we're talking about, what's likely to be built on them, and the limited way in which they were apparently advertised. I certainly can't say I spotted any of that, but I might call mainstream advertising of these plots, as a result of which I don't know what they were being offered for. If it's correct that they were being offered at £300,000, how on earth NNC ever thought that that would be realistic is beyond me, because nobody is going to pay £300,000 for one of those particular plots on that site, or I would venture to suggest any plot on that site. It may be that the developer will satisfy the local authority that it's done what it was legally required to do. And so that may be an argument that we can't actually win. But then the question is, well, what are they proposing to put there instead? And what they are proposing to put up are 4-bedroom properties with detached garages. I've set out something, they're of the juniper type, and you can go on the site and look at what they are. They've got coloured bricks, they've got grey roof tiles, garages in the same brick but with red tiles. But they are literally 4-bedroom dwellings. And the one respondent that I saw on the portal made perhaps the fair point. Look, if they're going to be released, surely they should be meeting the need for smaller, lower cost housing than being offered as 4-bedroom properties. And I have to say, when I read that, I had a certain amount of sympathy with the person who wrote that, because it struck me that there would be a relatively strong argument for saying, if they are going to be released for the developer to develop, then ideally they should be smaller rather than larger. Currently a personal view. But there we are, that's what they're asking for, permission to build 4 4-bedroom houses on 4 self-built plots. It is interesting, you can see where they are there, and effectively they're between, I think, 11, 13 and 15 of St Peter's Road. So interestingly enough, of course, if you look at them and you look at the properties that sort of carry on, if you look right across the plan, and you look at the density of those, compared to, Lisa, if you just move it up a fraction, no, the other way, thank you. And you look at the density of the housing in St Peter's Road, what you will notice is that most of those properties are on either double plots or plots and a half that were developed in the 60s. And I remember that we said, look, if you are going to be building on there, then in terms of building along that boundary, you should be more reflective of the similar sort of thing. But needless to say, you can see that that isn't exactly the way that it has panned out. And indeed, there is, if you look somewhat further along, strangely enough, behind what was my previous home, 17 St Peter's Road, the properties down from there towards where the mayor, former mayor lived, it looks particularly dense. But there we are. The specific application is, do those 4 sites get changed?
No.
And just as one final point, in the first iterations of the site plans, those 4 self-builds were on the completely the opposite side of that development and closer to these water treatment.
Yeah.
They sort of migrated away from there, which was probably sensible, even if the pricing then wasn't, so that they are about as far removed from the site of the water treatment plant as you can get what's remaining on that development. But there we are. Do we think that that's okay, or do we have reservations?
No, guys. Hang on, John.
No, you're fine, I'll come back to it.
I've got, no. Simple.
No reservations.
No, I'm going to object.
And is that on the basis that, I mean, it seems to me there are 2 things. One is, has the developer done all it could to sell the self-builds? And we're not really in a position to say whether they have or they haven't, but what we can do is certainly beg the question and make them think about it. And the second is, if they are to get permission to develop it, are 4-bedroom houses the right thing? I take it in the sense your objection is probably on both fronts.
It's on both fronts. I mean, I just wonder if we could, if Northants planning are interested in that. But I would be suspicious. I would want to see some form of, we've already mentioned that whether they have the enforcers coming in and checking to see what they were selling these plots at, because they're playing us. They've been playing us. I mean, I opened the house, didn't I, the big house, and they were doing loads of money. So the rugby club got money, the school got money, they were supporting all that. And I thought, great, this is like they're trying to be coming across as a nice one. But actually, the rugby club hadn't had the second batch of money, so that's all dried up. So was that just publicity at the beginning? They're trying to come across as these nice people. They've been absolutely rubbish, nasty. I mean, our mayor threatened with legal action. This whole thing has been a nightmare. And they're to keep it, pardon my expression, but they're pulling their donkeys in when they do that. And I just think, no, we've got to sort of, we've accepted what they've done, but now we say, no, this is, I like the idea, if it was part of the plan, that people could build a house on a plot in that area, why can't we keep to it? Why do they have to change?
Yeah, I'll say, the headline is, I do believe they should go back to self-build at a reasonable price. We've seen a few occasions, haven't we, of profit being put over. People and the people of Oundle with inappropriate offerings being made, sometimes after promises or previous forms have come out. Then we do just have to be careful what we wish for, not to appear somewhat perhaps against ourselves. You know, if we did say, no, we wanted these to be affordable homes, which of course, yes, seems like a good thing, there would be perhaps a greater housing density there, because those 4 plots would presumably become possibly 8, and you know, that won't help our population worries, of course, and the density. So I perhaps wouldn't want them to be, in this unusual circumstance, affordable. Well, I prefer them to be more affordable in the whole plot, but obviously I don't want 4 to become 8. But they should remain self-built would be my vision on a decent price.
Yes, that's a fair design.
I concur with what Councillor Jones says, and I think it also, an argument to put forward is actually we would have liked to have seen the self-build plots to be seen as affordable plots in the terms of a self-build, because anybody that's looking to spend 300, 350 on a self-build plot, I would say it is about making money. You then you build the equipment, so you'll spend 200,000, 250 on it, and then the other third you gain would be if you chose to sell the house. Well, that would make that property on that very small plot suddenly, you'd actually be saying, well, actually, it makes it become 750, between 750 and 900. Well, that's not achievable based on what price they were selling that self-build plot at. And I think that's the key. That's why the plots haven't sold, because they didn't put them down as affordable self-build plots. They put them at the highest end they could. And let's face it, yeah, it would probably be a bit disingenuous in terms of doing that, but it may have been done by design as opposed to actually supporting anybody trying to build, self-build affordable. Because there are people out there. The St Christopher Drive is another case in point. That's got some plots allocated for self-build, and quite rightly, there are people out there who want to build their own eco houses and all that sort of thing. There's some further down Blackthorn Road. So I think that from my perspective, they should remain as affordable self-built plots, or they are put back into the system as affordable homes in whatever way, shape or form, but whether that's to sell or to rent on in the future.
Surely logically, all they've got to do is lower the price. If you can't sell something
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you? But they're going on
for one price, you lower the price, don't you, in a marketplace? there's a little sentence here, the detached juniper type, buff coloured and grey roof tiles, but the separate garages will have red tiles. How does that fit with the rest of the site? Is there something about that little innocent?
I think it's what it says, these are.
I nearly lifted it out of their own paperwork. I haven't gone to the exercise of trying to figure out whether
Right.
that is common across the site. It's a fair point. If it wasn't, why should these be different? I suspect that in fact that is common on the site, and that probably all the detached garages have roofs of a different colour to their houses.
I'll
But
drive up my
quite the sense why that should be is
Yeah,
another matter.
just wondered why.
But it might be worth just flagging that we wouldn't want that to stick out like a sore thumb, so to speak.
Yeah.
Any other or dissenting views? with
But I
regard to
was
that?
a centre, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with exactly what's been said already.
I'd like to see NNC do, North Ants do some action to see what they're trying to sell it. I mean,
I'm pretty
why
sure
was
that
it
they
there in the
will
first
have done.
place? But why was it there in the plan? There was a reason for it, I'm not sure why, but it's,
Well, as I said, it's because the joint core strategy says that there should be.
well, there you go.
That's it. But I have no doubt that the regulations, if you like, under which it was done, prescribed minimum standards of how it was to be marketed, and no doubt that had to be supported by some sort of evidence. But
But this is where we can be strong.
I rather suspect that they've ensured that the evidence is available to support what they said, but it just seems to defy logic. Anyway, I think we are united in our unhappiness with it. We've not been a very happy bunch this evening, one way or
I
another.
think we started off like that.
Let's come to something which is probably not going to cause us very much concern. 4A Benfield Road. It's in the conservation area, it's not listed in any way, and what we want to do is to take out a rear living room window and a patio door, which are therefore separate, brick up the space, and put in a new French door. Looking at it, you can see whether we would have any worries whatsoever.
Benfield Road is right, and opposite. It's 106. 106 Road.
For
Yeah.
I meant the number, sorry.
Oh, you mean the number of us? So,
Does anybody have any worries about this one?
I'm just looking it up. I don't think so.
Didn't we have an application at this address recently?
I have to say, if we did, I've missed it, because as you know, Johnny, I usually, if I do pick up on it, refer to it. If there has been one, I don't know.
There was a previous application where they're converting the
Oh, yes, there
garage
was.
into a kitchen.
It was opposite the, not quite
The
the
trouble is, I've no idea.
No, that's Benfield
It's taken an awful long time to work my way through my
I
various.
think that was,
Previous
no,
notes.
that was, you're right, I think that was Benfield Court. So let's have a look.
The Benfield, I think that's slightly different.
That was
This
number 3.
this one's definitely converting the garage into a
Yeah, but it
kitchen.
looks like they're in collusion.
I don't know the short answer.
Yeah, I mean, not that there's any.
And if there was, you can actually on the portal, if you go to that search facility, you can put in the property address and then see what's actually come up against it. So I've got to try to.
It was a proposed garage conversion at 4A Benfield
Yeah,
Road on December the 22nd.
Oh,
The 14th of December 22, yeah.
yeah, right, I did miss, I'm very well remembered.
So
I really had not picked up on that.
photographic.
Yeah, right.
Our concerns at the time
Is this where we were debating about,
was about lack of parking.
about parking?
Yeah.
And we worked out we didn't quite understand it well, and it was
In
too
the
long,
end,
so
we
we left.
didn't raise any objection.
Yes,
I remember.
so like Wednesday Park, we weren't looking quite right.
Grants permission.
Yeah.
So they've got permission for that.
Well, as I say, this is there you go. Proposed garage conversion.
They're carrying on there, they're carrying on.
So what did they do then?
So the proposal was to convert an internal single garage into a kitchen to build a single-storey extension with 2 roof lights.
They just replace it.
And again, the dimensions of it to be built as butt face with bricks to match the existing, grey side to match the existing, both windows and doors in brown UPVC also to match existing. And it wouldn't extend beyond the rear extension of number 6. No new windows were concrete properties.
Do they need planning permission to put a door
Yes, because they're conservation.
in the conservation?
They need it anyway. And it's a window.
Oh,
Is it because they're in the conservation area?
Yes, I think because it's in the conservation area,
Well,
that's why.
You know what the answer's going to be?
Yes, I remember we,
You know what the answer's going to be?
It's the furthest right building before you start cottages, isn't it? Because it's just recently been sold, I think there's that.
Yeah.
Not long been sold, should I say?
Yes, that's right.
6 months ago.
I have no objection, but
Yeah.
No,
conservation
no, no.
officers,
Um,
conservation officer.
Well, we could certainly make reference to it, I can't believe it's.
It replaces the living room patio with a French door. That's surely going to enhance the premises.
Got no objection.
No objection from me.
Right, let's move on. 75 West Street. Here I have to say, we go again, it's another property in City Court. This is to replace a single glazed ground floor sash window with a double glazed heritage sash in same style, replacing a single glazed ground floor bay window with double glazing in keeping with the style of the house. This, council may recall, we saw as recently as the 17th of April, or at least this is building consent was granted on the 17th of April. We looked at it on the 4th of April. Where we made some observations, we said we had no objection subject to any contrary view of the conservation officer. I have to say, it looks like what happened is that they didn't put in an application for full permission at the same time as they applied for the listed building consent. So having got the listed building consent, somebody pointed out they ought to apply for the full permission. That's the only thing I think of.
No,
I
I
can
That
tell
makes
you
any
that's
sense.
exactly the case.
Bearing in mind that we didn't have any problems with it, and it got its permission,
no,
we just record no objection, move swiftly on.
Yeah.
let's move swiftly.
Right, the former Barclays Bank in 2 New Street. A property with which doubtless we are all familiar from the outside, if not from the in. And essentially they're decommissioning it, so that means taking out the
Just-
etc.
this has been done, all of it's been done. The Barclays stuff. It's all been done already.
Has it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's interesting because it clearly shouldn't have been, and if it has, we'll go and complain about doing it
they want to get out.
ahead of getting permission for it, because it does require listed building consent, because it is a listed building.
They've removed the ATM, but they haven't bricked it up yet, have they?
No,
It's
they've
not
taken
picked
the
up.
things out and
Yeah.
just
Just
put
boxed
the
it off.
plaster.
And I think that in essence, they've jumped the gun slightly by taking the things out, but they haven't actually done the full kind of restoration job, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, where the external ATM was, there was a window that we locked off. Replace that with reglazing, get rid of the night safe, import the existing cut-out hole by brick existing, removal of a panel, removal of a CCTV camera, removal of signage, removal of internal counters and furniture. It strikes me, and historic England are concerned to neither NMC archaeology, that this is one where we would presumably observe that we don't have any objections, provided the conservation officer doesn't, and insofar as they're removing anything internal, so long as it doesn't compromise any valuable internal fixtures and fittings or what have you, that we wouldn't have a problem. And it doesn't look as if taking it up the counters and things would have any detrimental effect on the building as a whole. So, as sure as I can, that the conservation officer is going to be perfectly happy with this. And it probably actually tidies up the appearance of it,
Right,
so
so,
because we don't know what the change of use application in due course is going to be.
let's see.
It'd be interesting to see.
Oh, the next one's easy.
The next one's not as easy as you think.
Oh,
Was.
Because although it says there's no paperwork for information only, actually there's quite a bit. I went on the portal thinking I'm going to find anything. There indeed is an application and other bits and pieces to support it, including quite a long legal argument
no.
about kind of what is and isn't a caravan. And in essence, what it appears to be is that the owners and occupiers have elderly parents, and they want to put what in effect is going to be a permanent caravan in the back garden so that they can go and stay in it. Picture that. I think the idea being that they would probably sleep in it, but that they will take their meals and do their cooking and washing. You know, everything else will actually happen in the main house. And that the caravan will not be, as it were, a permanent structure, other than the fact that it will be connected to things certainly like electricity, and I'm assuming some sort of fibre drainage or what have you as well. And a neighbour, when I say neighbour, I'm assuming a neighbour, has put a comment on the portal. They made one or two sort of general points around certain specific construction matters. But then goes on to say, well, look, if it's going to be there, should there be some sort of a condition that stops it, for example, being let out as an Airbnb? Because is that desirable? And should there be something in it, because if it's going to be used for these elderly parents, should there be something akin to a condition that says that it can be occupied by these particular people, but once they're no longer in occupation, that it has to be removed, so that it doesn't become permanent. And the respondent makes the further point that in their view, this could set something for precedent. There having been previous applications about putting things in back gardens that have been turned down. And I must say I do have some reservations about the idea of having a kind of permanently residential caravan in somebody's back garden in this fashion. That's it.
So what can, so can we say yes, but, and then list things that has to happen?
Well,
Because I don't know.
I mean, we're a consultee, I suppose we can make up whatever observations we like at the end of the day, but where they take us remains to be seen. What they are looking for is a certificate of lawfulness to say, in essence, that it would be lawful for it to be there. As I said, it's quite a long,
You don't want
there's a long legal argument in there citing numerous cases in one description and another.
Yeah, I know.
But it's actually more fundamental points that the person who's actually put a comment on the portal raises that, to my mind, are the issues about should it be restricted in some way to particular occupants? Should there be some sort of time limit on it?
Yes.
Etc. That's all.
I mean, if, just looking at the Google Maps for that address, if there is a caravan in the garden, and it's not exactly big. So I would say I would struggle, I guess, what I'm trying to say is, I would struggle to see how an elderly person or two could effectively live in that space.
No, they're visiting. It's the elderly person's in the house, isn't it? And the caravan's for the people visiting.
Is it? I mean, that
Of course,
wasn't the
that's-
way I read the comment.
It's not the way I read it.
I rather don't think they're putting a caravan in, are they? It's the idea is to put in one of those static homes.
Yeah, it's a
right?
static
Yes.
home. So it's not a caravan.
We're sure about that?
Well, that's what the pictures are of
Well,
a,
looking at that.
static
Oh,
home.
okay,
sort of,
fair enough, yeah, okay, fair
I
enough.
think they said they're not proposing to pay separate council tax.
Yes,
So to my mind,
they're
I
looking
bet-
at it as being an adjunct to the
Auxiliary,
existing house.
auxiliary
It's
to
is
the-
an
already
elderly house.
Rated to be so.
I mean, I have sympathy for the actual idea, but we do have to be very careful about this precedent thing, haven't we?
Well, how many gardens in Arundel would be suitable to put one of these things in? And what would
That's
happen if
fine,
we put
right?
one
Well, no,
in?
I'm putting forward,
Airbnb.
letting them out.
Airbnb.
Because if you actually had hundreds of these things in the town,
Yeah, it'd be nice.
population is going to go up astronomically. I mean, is there some way of constraining it? That's for sure.
I think in terms of what we're being asked to decide, which is about the lawfulness, it's actually quite simple, and that is, it's lawful.
It's that's it, it's lawful.
End of the discussion. How they then use it is a different issue altogether.
Which becomes,
We're not being
becomes,
asked to decide that.
Yeah.
We're being asked to decide whether or not we have any grounds on the certificate of lawfulness, and I can't see that
But
we
I
do.
think it is the certificate of lawfulness, not only for it being there, but also for the use to which it is put.
Yeah.
And I think that there is an argument about that. I mean, I have to say, I don't know the answer, and it may be that NNC will rubber stamp it.
I
But I do worry about it, because this is a potential thin end of the wedge, it seems to me. Well, if these people get permission for it, I've got nothing against the individuals concerned at all. But if they got it, and other people learn that they've got it, what's to stop us being inundated with similar requests?
well, all I say is there is one in Herne Road, similar to this,
I was just going to say.
which is that for a few years ago, there's a bungalow down there, and in the back garden,
Yeah.
there sits
There is.
a thing very similar to this,
Yeah.
which comes back to the point,
The issue,
we're being asked to say, do we agree to it? But actually, it's lawful to do it.
yes,
It's the use by which, when it comes back to the permanence issue,
that's the issue.
which is when the complaints come in, we're back to the planning enforcement. Planning enforcement will come in and go, okay, we've got this there, is it being used in accordance with that piece of land? If it's not, that's when they take action to have it removed. That's how I do it. Same G Max, I think I do the same.
That's the problem.
I mean, is it a caravan if it's got wheels, or can it be attached to wheels? Because I bet this law thing,
Now you back to development, is it development?
No,
Is it
no,
can
it's-
be moved, it
yes.
can be moved, so that can be moved at any time.
but then you've got these houses that you see splitting off that can be moved as well.
Yeah.
So,
It's not us that's issuing this.
No, we're simply being asked to provide a comment.
And,
We're in a position where we're looking to provide a comment if we choose to do so.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
The bit where it says no paperwork is it means they've not sent me one of these, which means they don't require our comments.
Yeah,
Yes, that just
exactly.
because they don't require them, if they put it on a portal, we're perfectly
Yeah.
entitled to, because it's there, it seems
But
to be
they
a
don't
comment.
done that because there's a comment already from the
And
public.
there's already a comment from a member of the public.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, well, do we in some way wish to comment? And the options are not to comment in a way that indicates we've got no problem with it, or to indicate we have got a problem with it. I have a problem with it for the reasons I've indicated, which is as much as anything else, the precedent that it might set. If people are allowed to put these things up effectively willy-nilly.
I think the issue about lawfulness, whether this actually, it's one thing to ask for a certificate of lawfulness, but if that's set to be permanent, and yes, it says it's ancillary to the main residence, then it probably should have planning permission. So we're actually being asked, we're not being asked to come, are we? But if that's something that becomes a permanent structure, which one could argue that you're saying is not, you back to, only picks it up as what David said about wheels. Reading what we've read, it's not on wheels, it's a permanent fixture. So if that's the case, subject to the size and height, it becomes a planning application, not a certificate of lawfulness to put a lodge in place.
Is it a large garden shed?
Well, this is the point. There are people with sheds that, if they go over a certain height, you as a resident can complain. I don't know what it is. It's certainly over 2 metres, and it's normally the pitch height. So you can say, well, actually, that shed's too big. You need to reduce the height. There's only certain things you can have. Well, this is a permanent fixture in that garden. It's not. It's a lodge
It's not
of a certain
But
size. So I think we're being asked. We're being asked, Chair, the wrong. I think it's the wrong application. That's not something that we're being asked
No.
to determine in the planning application. It's one of those. I think it's difficult to comment on something because of what there. When it's there, I think it's a different picture altogether.
Is the picture we've been provided with the actual specimen thing?
Very
Because it
sizes.
sounds as if it's
Very
not.
sizes.
They've just shown a picture of a caravan, haven't they?
No, there's
I think
that
really
was-
caravan there, but I think the point is,
Yeah,
this is
it
not
is.
what they're applying.
Exactly,
What they're applying for is
exactly.
what is often known as a sort of, under the Mobile Homes Act.
Yeah.
And they are mobile in the sense that they can be picked up.
Yes,
Because they do not have foundations, if you like, that go into the ground. They're built onto some sort of a plinth on which they sit. And that's what this is about.
Exactly, it's,
Um,
the picture's irrelevant.
It's rather a large caravan.
That's got
But
two
it's
double bedrooms.
irrelevant.
It's
It's
I
not
mean, it's just,
destructive.
It's a caralobby.
I mean, they describe it as a lodge. And it's clear
It is a
that
lodge.
it is for residential occupation.
Yeah,
And let's face it, if they had applied to build a bungalow in that location, or that property,
it doesn't matter.
would we have had potential issues with it? Wishing chances, I suspect, we might want have done.
But they're not applying for planning permission for anything. They're applying for lawfulness to keep a mobile home.
Yes.
I'm
Yes, but
saying
we're
there's
on-
no grounds on which we can actually.
But is it a mobile home? That's the issue I have, the word caravan. I don't think it's a
Oh,
caravan.
it's the same thing. The point is it's a movable object. It doesn't matter whether it's a caravan, a mobile home or whatever. That's not the issue.
Well, I don't know. I tend to like the word. We're trying to say we're going to give them legal permission to use a caravan. My debate is it a caravan under the law? And we say it's a moving house, but it's a moving house, a caravan. Well, I'll bow to your judgment.
Chair, if I may, just one thing, please. Okay. Currently, it's a garden. Is there now going to be a change of use for that garden? Yes. It's going to have a 13 metre by 8, is it 8 metres or
6.5.
6.5 metre building placed upon it. That is a change of use for that premises, but
It's not
we're not being asked,
It's not a building.
but does it matter? Doesn't matter. A structure of some description is being put on there, which is a change of use for the land, which is not the original reason as to why that land in relation to that house. It says auxiliary, but we're not being asked to determine a planning application for that building. We've been asked to look at a certificate of lawfulness. Personally, I can't agree to a certificate of lawfulness on that because it's a change of use for the land.
That's my view.
That's my,
I'm not a lawyer, but I think technically it's not a change of use because it's a movable object.
I'm just looking
How
at
can you
what the
move it if it
definition of a
hasn't got
caravan
wheels?
is.
Well, it's not,
You
it's
can't.
just around, you can.
And
you think that ain't gonna be-
it's capable of
that is
being
gonna be
loaded
moved.
onto a low load.
Yes.
that's not going to be moved on, but again, it's change of use for the land for my law.
I think maybe the answer is this, and Councillor Shura may well be right at the end of the day. in that Maybe we can't technically say that it shouldn't be given a certificate of lawful use. But bearing in mind that we are able to make comments. If the comments we make are ultimately deemed irrelevant, so be it. But I'd be awfully worried if we didn't make any at all, and it seems to me that that's the issue. I'd rather make them and then see that they're totally ignored than not make them at all.
How about overdevelopment of the drive?
I have no objection to that, so I was just trying to point out that I think what we're being asked to do is relatively cut and dry.
What we could say is that we do not, going back rather to where we started, we don't consider ourselves necessarily competent to judge whether it should be issued with a certificate of lawfulness. But what we do is we do have considerable concerns about X, Y, and Z.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that
I'm up for that.
And they are saying it's permanent, they're not saying it's temporary in their application on the planning portal. Is the proposed operational use, and it says permanent.
Yeah.
So but that's then,
This is the problem, it's a permanent temporary structure.
but in terms of planning, but, no, but in terms of planning, it's a change of use of the land and it needs planning permission. That's all, I'll say that from a little knowledge around planning.
All right, I think we're worried about it, we're not sure whether technically it's entitled to a certificate of lawfulness, but as a principle, I don't think we're particularly keen on it.
Yeah.
I'll find a form.
Yeah, I think that'd be rude. It's just, I'm trying to work out what the official definition of a caravan is, and it's not. It's got it
You need to look at it in
If you read that sort of 18 pages
in
of
the law,
legal
yeah.
argument that's in there.
It's a legal thing. I like the document that talks about it and says it's defined in it, but I can't find the definition of a caravan.
I'm minded to say let's move on, it's half
Yeah,
past
I
nine.
think
Yeah.
We have got one more application to look at, and happily looking at the rest of the agenda, there isn't much to talk about. But I think we may want to spend a minute or two on this one. It's an application to fell a tree due to ongoing building damage. And the observant amongst you will realise that we had a similar application that we said, it's all very well producing this tree surgeon's report saying that he believes that it's responsible for damage to the property. But where's the structural engineer's report that actually confirms this? So we actually said, unless the tree surgeon the tree officer is entirely satisfied about this, we think that there should be a proper structural engineer's report. NNC took exactly the same view and refused that application.
Right.
So they've now come back with a structural engineer's report. And the structural engineer's report essentially says, this tree has caused damage to this property and is in danger, as it were, continuing to cause damage because it is 1 metre away from the structure. Its roots are going underneath the structure, and the combination of the roots and the very dry summer of 2022 have resulted in some structural damage. So on one level, the applicant has dealt with the concern that we had, i.e. it's now produced a structural engineer's report, and to all intents and purposes that structural engineer's report says it's causing the damage and the recommendation is that it is simply removed. I looked back at the reasons for the refusal originally, and permission was refused, not only as it were because there was no structural engineer's report, but they also took the view that even if there was evidence to show that the damage was directly linked to the tree, query, does that mean that the tree has to be completely removed, or is there, as it were, a kind of halfway house? And what we don't see amongst the paperwork, that's the structural engineer's report. What we don't see is anything from the tree surgeon suggesting, if you like, why it is, as I read it. There is no other option. I suspect, therefore, that what would be sort of consistent with our general policy and also the view that we expressed before, would simply be to say that if the tree officer is satisfied that there is no alternative but to remove the tree, then we wouldn't object. But if the tree officer believes that the problem could be sufficiently ameliorated by something less than removing the whole tree, then we'd rather they didn't have to remove the whole tree. And that seemed entirely consistent with our general policy, indeed, position we took last time.
Because I don't, we're very keen on not losing any tree. So,
Interestingly enough, there was an application recently for number 20, I think it's 25 this spring.
yeah, we've been there before.
And that was basically some sort of tree husbandry work to a Wellingtonian, which did get permission. But this is complete removal because of the damage to the property and the risk that it will just go on getting worse.
So,
Dave,
Oh,
Sorry, I
sorry.
just don't know, I
It's
agree
too
with
far
what
back
you.
in this
No, 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 I agree entirely with what you've said, David, but I don't know whether you're aware of the site, but the tree is one of several trees down Stirlings.
Yes.
Wellingtons are actually very rare, quite rare trees in this country. And the point is that they're all quite large. That's the whole point, they're very, very large. Yes, you can see it there, and it would be lovely if we could somehow save at least part of the tree. Because they are beautiful trees.
Yes, it's described as a mature tree, but the suggestion is that we're still growing and will continue to grow.
It will grow for the next 2,000
1,000
years.
that's what we want to be there.
Well,
That's an interesting proposal,
but,
Okay.
does anybody take
Yeah.
it?
No, I don't take a difficult. I'm fully in favour of that because we are demonstrating that we are trying to save the tree, but at the same time we're being careful about the person's property. We respect that as well, and it's experts. We've gone to 2 experts. We need to go back to our expert, and if the expert says this, we have to go with what the expert says. I think it's something that we don't have enough expertise to worry about. We know what we want to try and do. And I think the solution is go to our tree officer, see what that person says, and go with that.
Anybody to move from that view? Then that's what we'll do. That completes the various planning applications we've got. There's only a couple of planning outcomes in there, and you can see if our comments were that they've been granted and one tree was permitted to be removed. And there is nothing else on our agenda, save for any other matters to report, so I'll start at that end, Councillor Shore.
No, that's it.
Suggestion?
Thanks.
No.
No. That's all right. Okay. Unless there's something I should be saying or doing. No. In which case, at 5 to 10, we'll thank you. Close the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing a very difficult.
It was not.